Welcome back to Oratio Podium, the space for agility, intellectually, rhetorical skill, and the leaders who facilitate global discourse and conversations. I'm your host, Kaushik, and today we have a guest who embodies the highest standards across dimensions of competitive debating and public speaking, coaching, and judging. Our guest is Oyewumi Emmanuel Oluwatobi, Toby in short, an experienced international debater and public speaking adjudicator, speaker, and coach. Toby is known for his remarkable versatility, having excelled in multiple formats, including British parliamentary, world schools, and Canadian national debate formats, and also is a recent civil engineering graduate of the University of Ilorin. As a speaker, he is the champion of the Emirate Verbal Combat 2023, grand finalist of Vanguard Open 2025, and as a judge, he has served as a breaking and finals adjudicator at top regional events like ANUDC 2025 and the Tri City Fall Tournament as well, judging over 100 rounds and across more than dozens of international competitions in Asia and Africa. Welcome to Oratio Podium. If you would like to say a bit about yourself before we dive right in.
Okay, thank you so much, Kashik, for this opportunity to be here. Well, I think you said it mostly. I just want to add that I'm still learning. I'm not in the position that I want to be yet, so I'm still improving. I'm still getting better on things. And yeah, that's just it. I think debate is one sport that we can always get better, even if we are able to reach like maybe our goals and all of that. There's still like space to improve and to continuously like get better on ourselves.
Very true. I guess the fundamental aspect about this is that you have to always accept the fact there's always something next to do, and you always keep growing regardless of whatever is the situation around you. So let's just dive right into it. I think the first thing that I'll probably ask you is why debating? What got you into it?
To be honest, I actually loved a lot of speaking activities when I was in primary school, but I was really shy, so I didn't really get into most of it, right? Because we did things like debates and all of that in primary school, but there were much more of the rudimentary debates like "Good morning, panel of judges, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair." Comes to defend that food is better than no being a teacher is better than being a professor or something like that, right? So it was just the basic rudimentary style of debate, but I was really shy, so I didn't participate as much as I would have loved to. So entering into university, I think that was one of the things that I made up my mind to do. And I was really, really passionate about it because I knew that going forward, especially entering into my final years, I would have to like present, especially when you do your project and all of that. You would have to present most of the workings, your findings, and probably the summarize what you have been able to work on during the brief amount of time that you have been given to do things like research and all of that. So I knew towards the ending of my school year, I would need to sort of develop these skills, and I saw that debating was like one of the best way to do that. So I think during the COVID-19 pandemic was when I first heard of our University of Ilorin debating club, and so um, we're still in school then. We're doing like our workmanship during that period, but it was pretty brief. So we just got like an intro into what debating is, what BP debating is. The next year, when things had calmed down a bit, that was when we fully got assimilated into the club. We were fully taught the rules, what adjudicating means, the different rules, and all of that. So yeah, that was basically what brought me into debating.
Succinct but also precise, I think, in the way in which you were presenting it, because high school was a place where I also had a lot of problems in terms of engaging critically. I mean, I loved to think and I loved to read and I loved English as well, but I could not really make it count in terms of public speaking. But I guess everybody at the end of the day ends up being in the place that they want to, and I think that's your journey as well. So very true to yourself too in terms of how you're approaching this. But since you have such a like large amount of experience doing a lot of different things around judging, around say adjudicating and so on, you've also served as adjudicator in major tournaments. So let's just dive into the journey about how you have started judging as a activity. So initially people usually just think about speaking and think about conversing around different tournaments and participating in different tournaments. What motivated you to be a judge and how did you start out?
Yeah. So to be honest, I would say that initially when I started out, I wasn't that very good of a speaker. Like initially when I started out, I was good, but after a while, I started like losing a lot of tournaments I wouldn't break, especially when it comes to speaking. This was due to a lot of factors, mind you. Like there were a lot of things that were, I think, taking a lot of my time during that period because I was still doing things like trying to handle school activities, also coming for training and a lot of other things, right? So at some point, I just looked at it and said, wait, um, in our trainings, they always advise us, right, that we shouldn't shy from both judging and speaking because if you want to be a very good judge, you also have to have experience speaking. And so I thought, okay, since I'm not doing as much as I would have loved to be doing, right, performing very well in speaking, let me see if I'll be able to like do well as a judge, right? Let me see if I'll be able to like stack up a lot of achievement as a judge. And so I started like attending or registering for a lot of online tournaments. Usually, registration, you would have to do things like register for an IA, like probably where you would be given remuneration and all of that. But I knew I didn't have like achievement, so I just registered for anyone. And if I was lucky to be picked as a subsidized IA or yeah, a subsidized adjudicator, I would just put in my effort that weekend, see if I'll be able to break, and then whatever out rounds that I'm able to get to, I'll just take it like that. But yeah, that was initially what like just pushed me into judging. It's more of like, oh, you're not doing well now as a speaker. Can you check out other parts of the BP debating and see if you'd also be able to do well in those particular areas as well?
Interestingly, you have to always state the truth, which is that everybody starts out terrible. I think if nobody in their right mind should say that they're very good from the get go. Very few people start out very well because I think they have some amount of experience either in school or somewhere when they are doing well. But in terms of your biggest achievements and in terms of your journey throughout this, I think you've done lots in terms of being chairing rounds and taking part in grand finals and everything. So from starting out where you say that you've had these opportunities given to you where you have worked for it and then initially grown from where you were to where you wanted to be and still going to a place that you still want to achieve something from. So how do you balance your journey? How do you do different things which would sort of say that helps you improve but also reach the place that you want to? So what were the things that helped you and what were the things that you saw the most amount of issues from?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it's just like determination, right? If you really love something, then you'd already know that you have to sort of put in a lot of effort into achieving that particular thing at the end of the day. I think that that's like the sort of philosophy that we had in our debate union, right? Most of the times our president will tell you that, look, you guys have basically joined the cult, right? If you enter inside, there's no getting out. Even if you're out, you're not truly out, right? And so that determination is what would keep you even during tough times, because um, a lot of the time we had to sort of balance debating with other things that we're doing, right? Especially when it comes to personal development. Because trainings, we don't like trainings at the end of the day, right? There's a lot of things that you'd have to do in trainings that we wouldn't be able to do as much as we would love to, right? Majority of your development depends on yourself and what you do when you're not in trainings. You just come to trainings to test things and see if they work, and then use that knowledge in maybe tournaments and all of that. So majority of the times it's just that determination that, oh, okay, I'm this is what I'm trying to get, this is what I'm trying to achieve. I want to break in tournaments, I want to be a very good judge, I want to be someone that people can look at me with confidence and say, okay, yeah, we can trust the kind of reasoning that this particular individual is actually telling us to be correct, right? Even if we might not necessarily buy it, but we can trust due to his experience that is actually making sense in his reasoning and all of that. So that was just basically what kept me pushing, right? It was tough, to be honest, but we ended up pushing it, and here we are today.
So I think the first thing that would always be a concern here is that when you're doing some high level roles, you also need to understand that there are also like conflicting interests which are going around in the debating space. So if you're a chair, you have to look at after the panelists. If you're a chair, you have to manage the room as well. So are there any things that you see that there is a concern balancing out and things that you have issues with?
So I think at the end of the day, um, I wouldn't say I don't have that much issues. I think there are like for everyone, there's like going to be one particular thing that they have problems with, or at least they have difficulties with at some point in their debating career. I think for me, starting out initially, it was just having this sense of okay, um, what is the best strategy for me to use, especially when it comes to tournament, right? Especially for adjudicating, because majority of the times, um, as a panelist, because most of the times, if you do not have experience, you start as a panelist. I think starting out as a panelist, it was always making this conscious decision not to be swayed by the direction of the room, right? Because most of the time, what panelists do is, and this just like what has happened to me in the past, right? I'm not sure this is what everyone does, but most of the time, it's very easy for panelists to be swayed by the decision of other individuals, especially when they have said like they have given their initial call and they find out that the chair's call is different from them and they start discussing like clashes, right? It's very easy for the panels to just say, oh, you know what? I don't want to like stick with my decision because it might have a negative impression on the chair and that might influence or impact the way the chair would sort of like write or score me. So probably immediately he just says, oh, why did I do this particular thing? I'll just tell him something small and just flip my call at the end of the day. I think for me that was the sort of mindset that I had to change, right? That even if at the end of the day I do not at the end of the day agree with the judge or with the chair in the room, I shouldn't be scared that it would impact my what's the word my rankings or my judge scores at the end of the day, because that's basically the responsibility of a chair to hear your reasoning behind why you think a particular team ranks over another team and to share his own thoughts on it, right? Because sometimes in some rooms panelists end up convincing chairs, right? And sometimes it's vice versa, but most of the times because of that sort of I don't want to call it inferiority, but I would say it's like probably because of that fear that oh, most likely if I like defend myself against this particular chair, then I would probably score very low. They end up like flipping their call and all of that. So I think that for me that was what I initially had issues with beginning out. But over time I just learned that worst case scenario you get a bad ranking in that particular, maybe worst case scenario you get a bad score or bad feedback, but then at least at the end of the day you're able to get like maybe general feedback after the tournament on what you could improve in, use that knowledge and better yourself in the next tournament.
Importantly, it is very nice to consider this issue because I think it's predominant in the world around and in all the debating circuits that novices don't really have the ability to speak out or are confident enough, because sometimes I agree chairs can be scary or people with more experience can be scary, and there are a lot of like experienced people in the circuit. Sometimes novices make mistakes which experienced people call them out, so this can become something of an experience which is very fear inducing with people who are just starting out. But I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. At the end of the day, this is a sport. You make mistakes and you keep improving and you keep doing things which can make you better and do something which keeps changing you for the better at the end of the day. But that brings us to a very important concern here as well, right? Because you said that there is an internal utility of how people work and how people operate. So, since you've judged like so many rounds and across so many competitions and also internationally, have you seen that this has become something that you have had to give coaching to different individuals for? Or do you think there are certain things which are very important to consider when you're looking after like different circuits or different representations, or very confusing situations occur in different regions across the world?
Yeah, so I think um, for that particular scenario, I think what I try to do, especially with my students, because I ended up coaching my faculty debate team for a while, that's for a while, right? When I was on the break, and I also ended up coaching them like this year, yeah, initially this year in preparation for our nationals. So basically what I end up like finding out is that it's always good to encourage like students to be able to share their thoughts, right? Even if in the worst case scenario they are not really sure of what they are thinking about. Because at the end of the day, sometimes it might not they might not necessarily have like a structure or probably a very nice way of thinking about something, maybe an argument, maybe about what they thought happened in the room. But like at the end of the day, sometimes that particular thought actually is meaningful, right? And I think the most important thing, especially for debaters, is to be able to be confident enough to share your thought, right? To back your thought, even if you think it's something that is nonsensical. Um, s- some One of my coach will be like, you should have confidence, you have overwhelming confidence that even the judges will be convinced that whatever thing you're saying, even if it's not right, is right at the end of the day, right? Yeah, but I think basically just working on people to have that confidence is important, because at the end of the day, every other thing that happens in the debating world stems from you being confident in yourself. If you're confident in yourself, then you'll be able to speak much more fluid. Your speaking will be much more fluid. You'll be much more persuasive in your arguments. And in the situation where you doubt yourself, it's very likely that even if your argument is true, your logic is correct and everything like that, at the end of the day you'll be very persuasive to the judges, because they are not seeing your confidence in your argument. It's like you're saying something and you don't believe in it, which just makes it look as if you're lying. Meanwhile, you might not necessarily be lying, you're just like maybe afraid or something at the end of the day.
So, if there are some things that you would say are the common pitfalls or mistakes that people are making, how would you rectify them, or what would you recommend people do to rectify them?
Oh, okay. I think one of them, like most, I don't know how to put it, but yeah, I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of debaters fall into most of the time, I think it has to do with one, the mindset that they do take, especially when they are entering into tournaments, right? Because for starters, I was someone that suffered from this, right? And it wasn't until I ended up like just asking a lot of experienced debaters online about what their take is when entering into debate tournaments in general is, right? So I think most of the time, majority of speakers have this feeling, or they go into debate tournaments with the mindset that they have to break. They That breaking or winning the tournament, right? It's something that would give them that sort of fulfillment at the end of the day. And if they don't get that, they end up very sad. They end up like very demoralized or depressed at the end of the day. And I think like this is a very bad mindset to go, especially when you're entering into tournaments, right? Because first off, majority of the time when you enter or when you go for debate tournaments, I think like apart from the fact that you guys are competing and it's a fun activity, right? I think the other reason why like people should go for tournaments is to be able to have fun, to be able to connect with individuals, to be social, right? Because you do not know where you might meet those individuals again in your life, right? Or down the line. And what happens majority of this time is that because of that particular mindset, that sort of impacts the way they socialize and they have fun and all of that at the end of the day. But more importantly, it sort of impacts or affects them in the sense that they forget the kind of good things that they have been able to achieve in a tournament. And I think like that is the advice that I got from a lot of top debaters, right? That you shouldn't go into a tournament with the whole idea or mindset that you have to win. Rather, it's much more better for you to do things like focus on individual skills and just like evaluate yourself on those individual skills as you debate in that tournament. So I think it was from Hada that I heard this. I don't know. I just like first of all got the impression that probably she's the real Hada on Facebook that I befriended. So I was just like, okay, let me just text her. Maybe she'll respond and something. And she replied back and she was like, oh, yeah, that's not the way I enter into tournaments, right? I've stopped feeling depressed about not breaking a long time ago. Like I've not broken in a lot of tournaments and I've broken in a lot of tournaments as well. So this is the mindset that you should have, right? you should like try and get a skill, or you should pick a skill. So probably in this particular tournament, I want to work on rebuttal. I want to say I can do very well in rebutting people's argument. And then during that whole tournament, you can focus on other things too, but you'll be evaluating yourself as you work on that particular argument and particular skill of rebutting. And then the next tournament, you pick another skill. And then over time, you see that as you're improving, or as you finish the tournament, even if you do not break, right, you have something to evaluate yourself on. You have something that you can say, oh, okay, I did well in this particular thing. Even if I did not break, that experience is something that is important, and it's something that will help me in other tournaments at the end of the day and all of that. And then in other tournaments, you have much more time to focus on other skills because you have already focused on one now. So maybe in another tournament, it would be, oh, weighing is a problem for me. Let me focus on weighing more. You discuss with your partner, okay, my partner do this particular thing. I'll just focus on the weighing and all of that. So I think the first thing is the mindset going into tournaments. A lot of debaters mistake that, oh, I just have to break and all of that. I think the second thing is the kind of pressure that they keep to them, they have on themselves, right? Because majority of the time, if you noticed, the speakers that win a lot of the tournaments aren't like fresh out of university, or are not debaters of 3 years and something. They are guys that have spent like quite a while in the debating space, so they are very experienced. First off, they have studied, they have learned a lot of things, they have taught a lot of people, and it's those sort of experiences that they are using in the tournaments to win. So like you telling yourself, oh, I have only 3 years remaining in university, I have to do something very spectacular before my 3 years are up. Well, it might be you may end up doing something spectacular, but majority of the time what I've found out is that debating is a continuous journey. So even after your school, like there are tournaments where you as like a like an open speaker, you're not associated with any university, you can go and participate. Um, we have a lot of like regional tournaments with people from worldwide, Uhuru Worlds, and all of that, that allow speakers from different places to participate and all of that, right? So, like, there's still going to be time for you to do some of those things that you think you want to do. But the goal is that don't just pressurize yourself so much that you end up like being depressed and quitting in the middle of your journey. Yeah, I think that's just the two things that I would like to say concerning mistakes that novices make.
There are two very important things that stood out from whatever you mentioned. The first one is that networking is a very important aspect of debating, and I think that was something which is very important. So let's just discuss that a bit. So networking, or maybe socializing, does help alleviate a lot of the stress and concerns that a lot of people have. So I think it's a very interesting thing that you bring into the picture here as well. So how do you think that networking plays a role in the broader scheme of how debating operates, and how should people go about this idea of socializing? And the second interesting thing from the discussion came around the idea that people need to keep growing and people need to keep changing. So I think that is something which was also going into my next question. So if you're giving feedback to teams, since you've been judging for so long, what are the critical aspects of feedback that you would give to, say, in terms of structure? So for example, if there's a new judge who wants to mimic probably the good points about your feedback structure, what would you be recommending to them?
Yeah. So I think for the first question, in terms of socializing, I think at the end of the day, it's just like so I think you shouldn't go into any round seeing anyone as your enemy, right? Because at the end of the day, first of all, um, you don't know what you will be put after that particular round. So, first of all, you might be unfortunate. I don't want to say unfortunate, but I think some people is fortune, and to some people is not fortune. But we might have the pleasure of like having OG in the first round, right? And you have a lot of very strong guys in the other positions, and you end up like not doing that well, and they capitalize on your mistake. That is part of the game of debating. It's not like they want you to make a mistake. It's probably things too that they have also had issues with, right? And I think the most important point of like socializing is that each person you debate um, are people that you can learn from, right? you could always ask someone like, "Oh, bro, I really felt your analysis on this particular argument, but what do you think about this particular thing that I said? Do you think I could have like maybe analyzed it a bit better, maybe did this a bit better?" At the end of the day, right? So that particular sort of interaction is what makes people like really close, because even at the end of the day, even after we battle it out in debate rooms, we still come out of the debate room like as friends, right? Not enemies at the end of the day. I think that's the most important thing, right? Because if you choose to like be very aggressive towards other speakers, it's going to be really like pointless, because you just lose out on the opportunity to learn from them and to be able to like um maybe get a good friend, because that person might be someone that is really good in terms of friendship, in terms of maybe even having like a another skill apart from debating that could help you in future. I think that's what I love about like the African debating circuit, right? Like majority of the people that you see organizing most of the tournaments that we have nowadays in our circuit are people that have been in the tournament for a while. There are people that have contributed in one like aspect or the other. There are people that even sort of contribute or donate to the different school groups as alumni to help like upcoming debaters go for tournaments to go and debate, especially because of the issue of funding and all of that at the end of the day. So those connections that they had when they were still young is what helped them to stay in touch and to contribute more as of now, right? And that's basically what you should like what a novice debater should aim to do at the end of the day. For the second question, in terms of feedback, I think the first thing I would just tell, I like to tell like upcoming judges is that do not, I don't, I would say like do not copy my feedback style, because even myself, I'm like integrating and like combining a lot of things that I've seen from like really good like adjudicators at the end of the day. But like I think the most important thing is just like knowing like developing your own style, right? Because there are a lot of different like there are some general tips to which like adjudicators give feedback. So probably you could start with, oh, maybe the losing team. You could start with the losing team and then you work your way upwards. Or maybe you could start with clashes. Oh, there were two clashes in the whole of this debate. The opening half interacted with them in this particular way. The closing half interacted. So there are a lot of like different ways that the different judges could give their feedback, but they all do it a bit differently. So the way I would do it is different from the way you might have to do it at the end of the day. But the most important thing is that doing it your way, the way that is most comfortable with you, is what would enable speakers to be able to get a very good feedback at the end, right? And in terms of like constructive criticism, it's always good to balance it out a bit, right? So when you're speaking to debaters or even judges, right, always tell them, okay, this is where I think you probably did very good in. You did good in this particular area, your analysis was solid, or the way you critique this argument was nice. But here is where I think you could have done better, or here is where I think you could improve. So you're not just like criticizing them on where they went wrong. You're telling them that, oh, they actually did well in a particular area. So they don't need to focus too much on that area again. And they should focus on this particular area to be able to get the upper hand in upcoming rounds and all of that. So yeah, I think that's just the basic things for those two scenarios.
So one important thing about your journey is also that since you're mentioning so many good critical points, the last thing that you would have had a lot of experience with this, since that you've been around in a lot of different circuits, mainly in Asia and Africa, you would have seen certain differences in, say, judging styles or criterions or expectations. So, what kind of things do you think are different from, say, in Asia and from Africa, and how do you like rectify your judging style for them before we move on to discussing some other aspects?
Okay, so I think well, I think there might be a lot, but I think like the most common thing that I have seen, especially when it comes to the differences between the two circuits, is in terms of the priority on arguments, right? I think that firstly, um, in the African circuit, I think especially for judges and for speakers, there's much more emphasis in terms of pragmatic arguments, right? So some like there are, there are principal argumentation and there's pragmatic argumentation where you have to sort of analyze and mechanize all your steps and all of that to be able to lead to your impact. In African circuit, we focus, like there's a lot of focus on the pragmatics as opposed to principle. And I think like that's the sort of major differences that I've seen, especially when it comes to Asian circuit, right? I think like in Asian circuit, there's a lot of times where judges like really take the principle justification or principle argumentation like really importantly, as opposed to African circuit where even if you do principle argumentation, you also have to sort of have like some practical arguments or pragmatic arguments to sort of like just solidify it at the end of the day. If not, your principle argumentation might not win you, or it might just get maybe a second or a third at the end of the day, as compared to someone that focus plainly on pragmatics. So I think like that's the first thing that I've sort of understood that are different in both circuits. I think the second thing that I would say that I've seen that is very different is in terms of the speaking speed, right? I think like more Asian speakers do a lot of spreading. I don't know if that's what they call it, but there's where they sort of like talk really fast, and like the judges also like are able to like grab all those arguments as opposed to African speakers where we sort of try to um like slowly build up our points so that we are not misunderstood, or so that the judges gets everything at the end of the day. So I think those are the two major differences that I've seen in the circuits.
The very interesting aspect is that I'm also guilty of speaking quite fast and being told by international judges that, oh my God, why are you speaking so fast? Slow down. But that's just the way that I am. And I think as a speaker, it becomes a habit when you're having a lot of content to say in a less amount of time. And I think that becomes something that people get more used to. But that brings us to a very nice segue into our next section about your speaking experiences and journey. You have also spoken and have done well in, say, the Verbal Combat 2023 and also in Crawford University Debate Invitationals. What drove you to become better at speaking, and how did you like transition from that early stages of that not being that good a speaker as you were mentioning earlier to now being good enough to go to finals and do well in tournaments? What was this journey like for you?
So I think that's one of the major factor that drew me to like improving myself on speaking was the advice that I got from Hada that I talked about earlier. Because initially I was really like discouraged because I had like participated in a lot of online tournaments. I didn't. It's either we did like well in some rounds, and in the remaining rounds, we ended up carrying either a third or a fourth, and that ended up costing us breaks. Or we're very close. We're maybe like the 17th team, and we didn't break at the end of the day. So I think like that at the end of the day sort of discouraged me. But I did get a lot of like advice from my coaches that look, bro, um, you're just tasting the tip of the iceberg, that they have lost in a lot of tournaments. That even when you do like cross that barrier of consistently breaking, it now becomes bottling, that is the next issue, where you get to finals and you lose the finals at the end of the day, or maybe you get knocked out in semis or something at the end of the day, right? So I think that advice from Hada was something that I ended up like really looking, really applying, when I ended up like coming back to debating after my break, because I think I had two issues mainly when I was in university. Was that the first time that I initially debated in an like in a physical tournament was in the Emirate Verbal Combat tournament, which was like our university internal tournament that we have with different like departments in the university or different faculties. And I partnered with one of our top debaters. His name is Ayodele Samuel, and him and me were able to make it up to the finals and win and all of that. So like that initially gave me very vested interest in debating. But over time, after I saw that, I wasn't like doing well, I took a break. I said, let me just stop debating for a while. I think that was when I ended up like taking up public speaking. And after a while, I was like, whoa, I really miss speaking, because I was just doing mainly public speaking and judging. I was like, whoa, I really miss speaking. And so, with that advice, what I did was that the next tournament that I went to, I tried as much as possible to ask for feedback from the judges, right? Because most of the time people do not like taking feedback from the judges, especially if they feel the judges did bad to them in feedback, or in the maybe the judge's justification wasn't good. But majority of the time what our coaches will tell you is that if you weren't able to convince a bad judge, then it means that you also might be a bad speaker at the end of the day. So you should go to them and find out what they thought you needed to work on, and then from there, in the next round, you improve. Who knows, you might see them as your chair in the next round. So that means whatever they told you is most likely what is going to work for them, and you can use that to your advantage to like edge out the other participants. So not being like overly focused on breaking, like I think the last two tournaments that I did, Crawford and the Vanguard Open, I always told my partner that, bro, don't worry, worst case scenario we don't break, you just go and chill. But like we shouldn't like give up, right? We should just do our best and see what happens. I remember in Vanguard Open, when they announced the break, I just told myself that, bro, we are not breaking, let me go and sleep, until I found out that they have announced break, and I saw our team name there. I was like, partner, bro, we broke. What, I was even shocked. It was like, really, we broke? And it was just like a really fun experience, right? Because um we just told ourselves that anything that happens, we'll get feedback and we'll work on it. So we're not really that focused on, oh, maybe getting a first or something. But if we got a first, that was good. What we're really looking at is the feedback from the judges, what they thought we could have worked on better. And then we tried to apply that in the next rounds. And fortunately for us, we ended up breaking. So the thing is that at the end of the day, right, there might be tournaments that we end up doing after that tournament that we don't break, right? It doesn't mean you're a bad speaker. It just means that probably either the competition was too much, or there are things you need to work on to improve on to give you an edge in that particular situation. So I think that's like the mindset that brought me back to debating in general, and just seeing a lot of like new speakers developing that interest and that motivation to continue speaking to, especially in my debating union. We had a lot of very nice new speakers coming up, showing that effort and strength that, oh, we want to debate and all of that. So I think that was what motivated me to come back to speaking, and I'm doing well. I hope that continues for the remainder of the year too.
Sam is a close friend, so I can understand his frustrations about speaking or not speaking from time to time. He has given me plenty of stories in the background as well. So, very nice to hear about your collaboration with him too. I think the first thing that comes out from that conversation for me is that novices or people who are starting out often get perturbed and just give out by just giving obscene amount of pressure on themselves by saying that, right, we need to reach this standard, we need to do this by this particular amount of time. So right when somebody is starting, what would be the piece of advice that you would give them? Because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that people are getting too stressed, people are taking it too much to heart, that they're not breaking or they're not performing as well as they intended to. So what are the few things that you would talk to novices or people who are starting out probably, and how do you think that they can improve?
So the first thing that I would just tell novices is that they should always ask for feedback. I think that's one of the most important thing, especially when you're starting out as a novice, right? Because as a novice, you need to work on a lot of things. You need to work on your style of speaking. You need to work on your analysis. You need to work on mechanization. And the easiest way to spot out what you're having problem with is through the judges, through the people that will be giving you feedback. So I think most times what happens is that, and I think most times it's good to get feedback from a variety of judges, right? Because they would give you like different levels to what is what probably you have issues with. So a particular judge might say your framing or your characterization was pretty nice, and he had issue with your analysis instead, that you should work on it in this particular way. And another particular judge could say, oh, maybe it was the reverse. Maybe he had an issue with your framing, your analysis was superb. So you probably know that maybe there's an external factor that affects both situations. Maybe it's the type of motion that you're doing. Maybe you're good in analyzing or framing for economics debates, and maybe when it comes to like belief or philosophical debates motion, you suck at framing all those sort of things. So asking for feedback just sort of like gives you a direction to where you should focus more of your efforts in. I think the second thing in terms of what I would tell novice is that they should try as much as possible to work on themselves. Like the personal development, they should take it seriously, because most of the time, right, you won't be able to like really do everything in the bedrooms. So most of the time you would like, I'm sorry, in training rather, training like, I think the University of Ilorin, our union, is one of the debating unions that takes training very seriously. Like we end up doing training like almost 3 times a week. And even those 3 times a week, our coaches will tell us that, look, this training is not going to be enough. You need to work on yourself, right? You need to have your individual efforts. You need to watch videos. You need to ask people questions. You need to maybe debate by yourself, or maybe just organize a spa. You can ask for judges and all those sort of things, right? So it's not something that you should just leave and say, oh, when it's time for training, that's when I will continue my training. It should be something that, okay, I've gone to training physically now. I would focus on a lot of things that I've learned in training. I would try and watch videos on them, try and debate and all of that, right? So that you end up just like being able to improve. I think that's basically what causes people to like improve faster, right? Is what causes maybe a speaker that just started out to start really doing well, even though it takes a lot of determination and dedication, right? And might take your time from other things that you're doing in school. It just depends on the level of commitment that you're able to put in. I think the last thing I would just say is that, yeah, they should not be too overly focused on the destination that they miss out on the journey, because the journey is basically what ends up like being the best thing ever, especially when it comes to debate, right? The friends that you make, the rounds that you bottled, the experiences that you ended up having doing maybe your tournaments or online and all of that. Those are what ends up like making debating much more interesting, and what's like ends up like um, basically developing the next route of debaters at the end of the day. So you shouldn't be too overly focused on, I want to be the best judge in Africa, I want to be the best speaker in Africa, because even when you reach that goal, there's always going to be something greater, right? So you should focus like much more focus on the present, on the journey, as opposed to that final destination at the end of the day.
When you focus on reaching some place that you want to be, it becomes easier for you to break it down into chunks. And I think that's the best piece of conversation we can have about how we reach our journeys as well. You've done so many things in terms of like debating formats. You've worked in British Parliament, you've done world schools, you've done Canadian national debate. You've also said that you've done public speaking. So, what format really motivates you? What are the differences you found between these formats? And what is intellectually more challenging to you, or what did you like from each of these?
Well, okay. So I think in terms of like debating in general, I think like BP is the most challenging to be honest, right? Because I think like BP has like the most comparisons that you have to do in a debate. In like the other formats that I've judged, mostly AP, Asian Parliamentary, WSDC, CNDF, they are just like two sides of the debate, the affirmative and the negative. So even though maybe the timing, like the speaking time differs, which just basically just means that they would have much more time to do things like give more argument and analyze better, it's just going to be two comparisons at the end of the day, which just makes it a bit more simpler as compared to BP, where you have to do like six. You have to compare the opening half, the closing half, the diagonal, the bench, and all of that. So I think BP has been the most challenging for me. Like going forward, I would prefer to not do that much BP debating, because it's mentally taxing, but it's also worth it at the end of the day, because if you're able to do BP debating very well, like other formats won't scare you. To be very easy for you to like do the comparison with like just two teams and all of that. In terms of the most interesting concept, I would say public speaking has been like one of the most interesting spaces that I've entered into, right? Because public speaking like combines the like logical concept of debating, and like it just like mashes it together with creativity, right? So majority of the times you'd be given one of the most weirdest insane tasks to do. Maybe you were sent back in time in the 1960s, and you have to convince people not to jump on the Titanic, that the Titanic is going to crash. Give a 3 minute speech convincing individuals not to go there. And you know that, bro, there's no way I'm convincing anybody. But you just have to like be creative and like give your speech, right? And I think that's one of the most interesting thing like about public speaking. Being able to come up with different ideas, being able to share it in a way that is understood by your speakers, your fellow speakers, your judges, being able to not be afraid, right, to share those ideas. Because most of the time what happens is public speaking pushes you um, in a way that BP doesn't, right? So I think what BP does is that it sort of forces you to consider both sides, even like maybe sides that you aren't really used to, right? So probably in a debate where you have to defend like LGBTQ, you might not be someone that is really that like conversant with LGBTQ rights. But when you end up debating, when you end up being in a room and you're sort of stuck by lottery on the side that have to defend them, then you have to like think, oh, if I was in this guy's shoes, right, what would I do? I think public speaking takes it a bit further, because you're not just analyzing arguments, you sort of have to like create an experience that that person have actually gone through, right, and share it as if you're them. So I think that's what like that's the extra push that public speaking gives you, right? Not just defending, or not just like analyzing argument from a person's point of perspective, but like sharing that person's point of perspective as if it were your own. At the end of the day, that's what like public speaking ends up like pushing you to do. I think it's like very interesting to like both debate and sorry, both judge and speak as a public speaker, because I've recently tried both. So it's been very inspirational, and like it's something that I would advise everyone to like try, even like good debaters at the end of the day, right? To try once or twice, or to just like do at the end of the day.
That was an intellectually stimulating way of looking at different aspects of debating journeys, because even with different formats there are some things that are easier in some things that are harder in some. I'm pretty sure that everybody also has their own personal preferences and choices, but that's a very nice exposure in terms of how you differentiate between these different things. So a small segue I think could be into your debating and coaching journey, because I think you were also mentioning to us before the start of the show that you were a coach. So you've been competitively speaking, you've been competitively adjudicating, but now you're also coaching from time to time. So do you have any stories from your coaching experiences, or any particular things that you've noticed while coaching which have made your life, you made you sit up maybe and think about your decision about coaching, or what are the things that you find your students getting the most involved in or participating the most in?
Yeah, I think like one experience that I really had, especially coaching this recent year, was just like having fun seeing our upcoming debaters in our department being really passionate about something, right? Especially if it's something that really matters to them. Like maybe, I think for me, it was when I think we had a debate about like, I think we had a debate about family. I think it was concerning either splitting up or something. I think it was like maybe I don't want to say I think it was like a hypothetical motion, right? And you end up seeing the speakers see like taking it as if it was them that is actually going through the situation, being passionate in the argument that no, I wouldn't do this particular thing. And we're like, bro, it's not you that we are talking about in the debate, right? But like I think that passion is very, very interesting, because most of the times, right, when we are debating, we are supposed to be really passionate about what we are arguing, because that like helps in the persuasiveness of that argument. It helps in people buying it at the end of the day. And it just shows that you really believe in what you're actually supporting, right? Even if it's something that maybe you ain't like you don't initially support, it shows that you're willing to consider that thing, right, and take it as your own at the end of the day. So I think like that's one of the really interesting experiences that I've had as a as a coach, especially. And then just like seeing people that were in my debate union doing well when we went to tournaments. Like I went to one a recent tournament, River State University Open, and I saw one of our debaters, right, participating in the novice stream, and she was doing really well. I even ended up judging her, and I was really impressed. I think that's like a really like good motivation for me as a coach, or at least as someone that assisted her during her journey, motivated her and all of that, right? Oh, like this somebody that has actually I've actually ended up helping, and she's actually doing well on her own.
Very important aspects of coaching lead to the conversation around the idea that how do you feel connected to your students, and also what the outcome of those teaching experiences are. If your students are doing well, you feel well. The same thing has happened to me also when I've been teaching either my juniors or students who have been teaching debating for a while. You become meaningful contributors towards their journey, and also meaningful conversations come up with them, and I think that is a very beautiful thing to happen. So, a couple of last segments that we discuss. I think the first one that we'll touch upon is that you have an engineering background, not a really conventional background that people would often consider when you're going ahead and debating. Maybe not so much in the place that I'm from, but also I think it's important to consider that different fields have different perspectives. So, have you had any like possible interesting points to discuss or think about as an engineer when you're debating? Was it something that you found relevant in terms of certain aspects of your debating journey or so on?
Yeah, so I think like the opportunity I had, especially coming from like the engineering background, was pretty like interesting, right? Because um like it sort of opened my eyes to be able to view a lot of arguments in a lot of like motions in a different light, especially when it comes to like technology, artificial intelligence, and all those sort of things, right? Engineers, right, in general are sort of used to those particular like developments, especially in technology concepts. And just like having knowledge about those concepts and how they work is something that has helped me when debating in these particular kinds of motion and all of that, right? I think the second thing is that the sort of concepts that you have in engineering basically are like in a way are things that are being applied in debating in general, right? Like having a structure to your cases, to your arguments, right? Moving from maybe the framing to your argumentation to your analysis and then to your impact, right? You notice that if you do not go in that particular order, then it's unlikely that your whole case would be able to stand at the end of the day. As a civil engineer, we are also taught all those sort of similar concepts in structure in terms of structures, that you have to start with the basic building block, the foundation, and then you move to the pillars, and then you move to the roof and all of that, right? So if you miss one of those particular concepts, or yeah, if you miss one of them, then it's unlikely the whole structure will be stable at the end of the day. And stability is what we sort of look for, especially when it comes to civil engineering, right? So I think that sort of like helped me apply those sort of logical steps when coming up with arguments, because I want my arguments, my argumentation, my cases to stand, to be clear to the judges, and having this sort of structure is what ensures that the judges can buy it and easily point it out when maybe they are deliberating and all of that at the end of the day.
Considering that you're from Africa and you've had a lot of like experiences debating, and I think you mentioned you're from the University of Ilorin as well, and wanted to touch upon this a bit because as a key figure from this particular debating club, what is the unique training philosophy or cultural stance that your university brings to the Nigerian and African debate scene? Have you had any possible encounters there which have made it better for you in terms of your debating journey, And what would you like to say to your juniors also who are going through, or people who have come after you're going through the same club?
So I think like one of the best like training philosophy that I've gotten from the University of Ilorin Debating Club is in terms of just like how you evaluate yourself and other people. Even if these are top debaters with you in like your room, right? Our previous coach, his name is Alex. What he usually tells us is that look, right, it doesn't matter if it's Tim Pujic in the room with you, or if it's Matt Cartio, or if it's Hada Goldberg, right? You should see everybody as a normal debater, not as some very big figure that you cannot necessarily debate. And when you're looking at them, you should not be looking at the accomplishment that they have had, but rather be focusing on the argumentation that they are doing in this round. Because nobody is perfect, right? It's very likely that they will make some mistakes. So that is what you should be looking for. I think that philosophy has helped me a lot of the times, especially when I'm going up against like top debaters that I have. I'm even shocked that we are in the same room, and I'm like, bro, or maybe I'm telling my partner that guy, this is who we are debating against. To anyhow, anything that happens, let's just debate, right? So I think that has sort of like put me on guard that even if I end up like in a room where I'm facing with these guys, right? They are human just like me. They started from somewhere, and it's most likely that they will make some mistake, even though they are much more experienced, right? So just taking them as a normal person, not as a very high figure, is what like has really like um is one of the like very good skills that I've learned. And also the fact that like we had a lot of very good top debaters in our debating union, right? And during trainings, we would always clash with them. Like we would always meet them in debating rooms, right? So we ended up like getting that trauma pretty early on before we ended up venturing into the debating space. Like so, it wasn't new to us again seeing top debaters in our room. We already like received top debaters back to back on a steady in trainings, right? Um, I think the last thing in terms of philosophy is just like putting in the effort. I think that's one of the things that our debating union really focused on, right? They really like stressed. I don't want to say they stressed us, but they really like um, squeezed out the best from us, right? And um, they would advise us that even though you're doing well now, you could always do better. You could always work on yourself. There are things that you could work on, videos you could watch that they might not have been able to teach you, or they don't like those particular views on the skills that they have taught us might be different from what you see online. So just being able to get those experiences like watch videos, being able to actually watch debate rounds and see how they are using their arguments, their structure, and all of that. I think that's one of the skills that they have impacted in me that is helping me now, even when I've like left the institution. And that's like basically what I use to improve myself from time to time. Even now that I'm not in this institution, that I'm not going for training, the urge to just say, okay, I need to watch maybe a video by Teen on maybe extensions or something like that, right? In terms of the juniors, right? I think like we always try and support our upcoming generation because first of all, we are once like them. We are once juniors. We received help from our alumni. We received help from our seniors. Every time that we ask for advice, even if they don't respond on time, they are always like they always try as much as possible to give feedback, to respond, to encourage us and motivate us. And I think like receiving such a opportunity to be able to get this sort of things from them, it's always like our responsibility to pay back, right? And we try as much as possible to do that, to stay in contact with the club, to stay in contact with the recent not alumni, the recent officials of the club. Any way we can contribute, we can assist, we do assist, especially when it comes to going for tournaments and all of that at the end of the day.
So debating does have such a significant role, right? Because you have the contributory measures that you have for your juniors and the people who have come after you in terms of your university, but also since you've done so much in Nigeria and also the African debating, and Asian debating circuits, you've seen that the debating community is a global network. So there are often chances for cultural or intellectual exchange between different individuals, and you would have seen this when you are traveling or judging international tournaments, and there would have been certain things that you would have had the chance to have engaged with. So there are a couple of things that I would like to ask you from this. I think one, how do you think that this activity, debating, can be used as a term for civil engagement or civic engagement and career success than just a hobby? And what are your, say, cultural or intellectual experiences which you had when exchanging conversations with different individuals or traveling to international tournaments? And the final thing that you would like to say would be the best for change in the African debating community, and what is the best way forward?
I think like in terms of okay, I think in terms of your first question, I think um, it's pretty interesting um, to see people like communicate with one another at the end of the day, right? And I think like that is the most like really um, nice thing about debating because communication should be like a two-way street, right? And I think that's what debating does that a lot of people lack, especially when it comes to like normal day-to-day communication, is the mindset that you may not always be correct, right? That your views differs from another person's views, and it's okay. It's okay to have different views. What matters is being able to understand your different point of views. Because I think at the end of the day, right, um, you're trying to convince, and like the whole concept of debate is that you're trying to convince an average intelligent voter. Nothing is stopping the average intelligent voter from buying both cases, right, and saying, guys, both of you are correct, let's end it. But the whole concept of BP debating is there has to be a winner, there have to be rankings and all of that at the end of the day. So that's why that person has to sort of compare and then end up deciding based on some metric. But in general, when it comes to applying those skills, right, to just like normal day to day discourse, I think the whole concept is that look, this person might not necessarily be right. I might not necessarily agree with the particular things that this person is supporting, but at least him telling me and him explaining his concept for me is something that exposes me to his point of view, right? So I'm now much more willing to look at it from his perspective as opposed to my own perspective. And when I share my own perspective with him, he's going to be able to do vice versa. As opposed to like real life conversations or communication where people sort of try and tune out the other individual. They just try and say whatever is on their mind and they don't like listen to the other individual at the end of the day. I think the second thing is just being able to like really look at things from people or maybe like from a perspective that we wouldn't normally have agreed, right? Because I think what debating does most of the time is that it puts us in the situation of people that we wouldn't even think we would have been. It puts us in situations of it puts us in situations that we wouldn't even maybe even have the opportunity to be in this lifetime. I think I remember one of the I think the finals motion for Crawford. We ended up having this debate where um, the um, it was a hypothetical motion where they assumed that you were a parent that had the ability to know whether your child is going to be smart or less smart when he's born, like from childbirth, right? And you had the ability to sort of reduce his intelligence to enable him to have like a nice social interaction when he grows up. That is a situation that we might not necessarily achieve in this our lifetime, even though probably technology might end up existing sooner or later in the future, right? But currently it doesn't. And so putting you in that kind of situation, you start to evaluate from the perspective of that particular individual, something that you haven't been able to do in the first place at the end of the day. So I think like those are just like the interesting concept that debating allows us to sort of think of that enables us to have much more civilized conversation in status quo. And these skills can be used anywhere. It could be used in the office. Probably you know that okay, you have to convince another individual, but you don't have to make it like the individual doesn't know what he's talking about. And so you know how you sort of like frame your speeches or your argument to make it seem that you're also considering his case, but you want to push or you want this particular thing to gain more support at the end of the day. in government, in different spheres of our life. I think like debating applies in almost different spheres of our life at the end of the day. And I think that's why it's a pretty fun activity. I think for the last question, in terms of the African circuit, right? I just think like to be honest, most circuits have like most African circuits are having a lot of disadvantages, especially when it comes to online competitions, when it comes to internet connectivity and the rest, right? You see that that sort of issue affects us a lot, especially if we are debating with like people that have like really good standard of electricity and all of that. But I think first of all is that I think there have been a lot of improvement, a lot of development in technology that is making things a bit much better. We have 5G, 4G now that is enabling a lot of people to do things like have those sort of like um, tournaments without issues, or at least do it well in such a way that it doesn't affect their speech and their um, persuasiveness at the end of the day. So I think like in future, just much more inclusivity, right? Because I think the only other thing that a lot of African circuits, or maybe even the African and most of the, let's say, Asian circuits are facing is inclusion in like really top tier level debating, like things like WDC, ETC, and all of that. We have a lot of scenarios where, like, even the teams, right? First of all, in terms of funding, being able to go for those tournaments takes a lot from schools, from people, right? To be able to fund, and the fact that this is something that first of all, it's something that is a bit of a risk, right? You're not always going to be sure that, oh, the team you're sponsoring is going to do well when they get to Worlds or something, right? They might just go there and unfortunately they don't break. But it's not a bad thing, right? Because they have been able to get that exposure. But for the schools that is sponsoring them, they need some sort of achievement to be much more incentivized to do this and all of that. I think that that's like one of the issues that a lot of a lot of African debating circuits face. Um, Maybe there are some circuits that have been able to sort of maneuver over this, or there are some circuits that have people sponsoring them, right, to go for debating competitions. But I think majority of the African circuits, especially in terms of Nigerian circuits, right, we do most universities do not have that opportunity. And I just think it sort of like removes this sort of competitive edge, right? Because we have a lot of people with nice argumentations, nice analysis, nice speeches, willing to share those speeches, but they don't have the opportunity to. I think moving forward, that is something that we should try as much as possible to work on. It might not be something that we immediately get like resolution to, but at least us as alumni and even the institution themselves, right, being able to sponsor and to assist the upcoming generation will go a long way, right, for like debating in general, especially in the African circuit.
That was a very, very descriptive and interesting piece of advice it and information that people would take a lot away from. So let's move to the last fun segment. And before we close out, I'll be asking you rapid fire questions. You have to answer with one word or one phrase, whichever is the most convenient option. The single best piece of feedback you ever received.
Analyze better.
The most
Analysis.
difficult format to master.
BP.
Ooh. The key to a good rebuttal is.
Um, analyze. Yeah, I think it's analyzing the rebuttal.
Yes, I would agree with that. A word that describes your adjudication style.
Really free. I'm free. I like all the panelists to contribute, right, when I'm adjudicating.
Your favorite type of debate motion, like ethics, economics, IR.
Economics for sure.
Uniloren's greatest rival debate university.
Ooh, I don't think we have one. I don't think we have one. For but if I
Fine.
should name a university that might give us a run for the money, probably Futo. Yeah, maybe Futo. Futo is giving us a bit of a challenge, but I don't think we have one currently.
Oh, fun. The most underrated skill in debate.
Yeah, framing and characterization, like it's something that people would like don't take seriously and could really impact debates like in general.
True. So the future of the African debate circuit is
Uh, I don't know. It's in our hands, maybe.
fun. So, policy area you wish debaters would research more deeply.
Um, I think in terms of like, um, I think in terms of government policy, and also when it comes to things like social movements. Yeah, I think social movement is an area that a lot of people do not like really research, and it also sort of affects the kind of policy that government ends up making, especially in like very liberal countries at the end of the day. So I think that's one aspect that a lot of people could work on and try and develop better. It's something that I'm trying to work on myself also.
A very fun project. Your advice for overcoming a losing streak.
Yeah, so don't focus on the loss, focus on the things that you have done better. So even if you lost, if you're able to work on rebuttals more, then take that as a win, right? That you're able to achieve this thing better. Or maybe you lost um maybe you lost a round, but you ended up moving from fourth to third. Maybe you had this sort of symmetrical progression that you were fourth, you were third, you were second, and you were fourth again, and all of that. So just focus on those. Uh, just focus on those tiny progressions and why you were able to achieve them, right? What you did right that enabled you to get to those sort of development at the end of the day.
True. I think that was a very fascinating close towards our discussion as well. Toby, this conversation has been very interesting and versatile, from debating different areas of, say, what to do and how to do it, and also in terms of adjudication and speaking. Thank you for sharing your experience with all of us who are listening in to Oratio Podium or viewing this on YouTube. Before we let you go, if you would like to say some final thoughts before we close.
Yeah, just I would just like to say that debating is pretty fun. Um, it's something that is really taxing, but it's something that the rewards end up being worth it at the end of the day. So to those of us that are doing it and are facing one issue or the other, keep at it. Sooner or later, you'll be able to overcome those issues. For those of you that haven't started doing it yet, I advise you to take it up. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a rocky start, but sooner or later, if you continue persevering and if you show a lot of commitment, you'll be able to work. You'll be able to like benefit better on it. I think the last thing is just that I'd like to thank the Oratio Podium for the opportunity to speak. I didn't really expect it when you guys reached out to me because to me, I've not really done as much as I would want to that would warrant me to speak on the podcast. And so I think it was really nice that you guys reached out to me. I'm really grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to much more interactions like this at the in future. Yeah, thank you.
Very happy to have you on board as well, Toby. It was our pleasure hosting you. I think it is something that I personally find that it's engaging and attractive to hear a lot of different vocal points and individuals who have a lot of rich experience from different regions. And you are being humble by saying you don't have any. But yes, thank you, Toby. You're a true all rounder and you're also raising the standard of discourses here. You can connect with Toby in the details mentioned in the description below. Thank you again for everybody tuning in to Ratio Podium, our viewers and listeners. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of hectic communication and intellectual achievement. Until next time, stay curious and stay listening. Thank you and have a good evening, day, or morning, wherever you're listening from.